All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Especially thank you to our speakers. I'm Christopher Douglas, the coordinator of the New Jersey chapter of Elected Officials to Protect America. If you aren't familiar with EOPA, we are a network of current and former elected officials who care deeply about protecting our planet and people. We're committed to solving the climate crisis, ensuring environmental justice, and protecting our lands and waters. EOPA is also the only national organization mobilizing veterans who are lawmakers on the environment. Today we'll be discussing the Transportation and Climate Initiative, or TCI, a regional cap and trade style program that would guarantee a continual source of revenue for communities most affected by pollution and historically underfunded. Our impressive panel today consists of Hoboken Mayor Bhalla, a member of the EOPA New Jersey Leadership Council, Atlantic City Councilmember Shabazz, a civil rights activist and professor at Stockton University, Burlington County Commissioner Singh, also an EOPA New Jersey Leadership Council member and executive director of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council, Richard Lawton. We'll take a few minutes now to hear from each of our speakers. I know some of us have other conflicts, so may be joining in momentarily. But we'll get started first up with Commissioner Bhalla. I'd ask any media or attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to use that Q&A function at any time.
Good morning, and thank you, Christopher, for that kind introduction. And thank you to the EOPA for having me, as well as TCI, for this very important topic, not only to the city of Hoboken, but to our state, region, country, and our entire universe. I just want to start by saying that I've had the privilege of serving the city of Hoboken as its 39th mayor for about 3.5 years now. And the very first thing that I did when I was elected, after I was sworn in, was sign an executive order declaring Hoboken a fair and welcoming city. And part of that executive order was ensuring that all people were treated equally, and that we integrated the priorities of environmental justice and social equity to people who were not receiving those equal rights and benefits in the city of Hoboken. And that relates directly to issues of climate change, transportation, clean energy, micromobility, and a host of other issues. Those issues in the context of Hoboken are comprehensively encapsulated in what's called our Climate Action Plan, which is a fairly lengthy document, but we've set very aggressive goals that not only meet but exceed the goals set by the Paris Agreement. We seek to be a net zero community by 2030, but also intend to achieve that goal with respect to municipal facilities by 2025. We also, in 2019, began purchasing all of our electricity for city operations with 100% renewable energy. Some of these steps will reduce or do our small part, but hopefully set an example for other communities to do our part to reduce our carbon footprint and some of the impacts related to that footprint on climate change, which we've really seen and witnessed firsthand. I'll tell you, I was a resident of Hoboken in 2012 during Superstorm Sandy. I can tell you very personally that climate change is real, and that that was the impetus of the mayor of Hoboken at the time to proactively engage not just our state, but also our federal elected officials on this issue of not just climate change, but also of environmental justice and social equity. Because what we found out from Superstorm Sandy is that underserved communities, our public housing, the residents in those communities were most drastically impacted by the adverse effects of climate change. Superstorm Sandy literally put our public housing in the worst possible condition in relation to other areas of Hoboken, which are more affluent. Our housing authority sits at the lowest point below sea level. And the impact of a coastal community when we have not just chronic floods, but a large event such as a storm or a hurricane, the people that are going to suffer are going to be minorities in our community. They're going to suffer the most. So that's why we proactively engaged the federal government and participated in a competition that was hosted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to see how we can break that cycle of destruction and rebuilding and destruction and rebuilding to create a resilient and sustainable community for generations to come. Hoboken was recently on a list of the top 10 communities that will be underwater within 50 years. And the very reason why we instituted this grant is called Rebuild by Design. It's a $230 million project to break that cycle. The reason why we're aggressively seeking this and implementing in the construction phases now of this comprehensive flood reduction, both chronic and coastal flood reduction plan, is to take us off that list of cities that'll be underwater in 50 years, to make sure that in generations to come, we break that cycle of destruction and rebuilding and destruction and rebuilding, and where we have a sustainable and resilient community for years to come. So it's a $250 million investment from the federal government to the municipality, administered by the DEP at the state level, but it's all three levels of government working together to achieve both environmental justice and greater social equity, as well as combating the impacts of climate change. There are a whole host of other topics. I know time is short. We're working on generating a robust infrastructure of electric vehicle stations to provide that as an option or an alternative to the use of fossil fuels, and to really give people and that also, Hoboken being a city which has in the entire country the highest percentage of residents that rely upon mass transportation to get to and from work. The highest percentage in the country rely upon mass transit. So we want them to rely upon mass transit in a safe, an environmentally safe environment, and in a practical environment. So micromobility, whether it's e-bikes, whether it's other forms of transportation, making sure that we work with New Jersey Transit to make sure that their buses are eventually transitioned to electric buses, to working with our ferry company to make sure they're transitioned to electric ferries, as we see on the West Coast and in South Korea now. Those are all things that we're working on. But last two takeaways: we need more assistance. We definitely need more assistance, and we need cooperation at every level of government, all the way from the federal government to the state government and local leaders like Commissioner Singh and others to make sure that there's that shared commitment to environmental justice and transportation. We have it here in Hoboken. We're moving forward with great partners at every level of government. And I just want to thank again, Christopher, for having me and giving me the opportunity to say a few words.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Very well said. It's tragic to see some of the climate crisis that Hoboken has experienced in recent years, but inspiring to see how you responded to that and the cooperation that you spoke of. We'll now turn to Atlantic City Councilmember Shabazz for some additional remarks.
Good morning. Let me say, first of all, I am honored and humbled to be appearing with such a distinguished and esteemed panel on such a critical, timely, and relevant subject as the Transportation and Climate Initiative. I hope that as we emerge from some of the stress and trauma induced by COVID-19, that our state is moving towards healing and a desire to end disparities and close the gap in the quality of life between New Jersey residents. As an elected official and also president of the Atlantic City branch of the NAACP, these two roles many times converge to have the same position on the same subjects. The Transportation and Climate Initiative is one example of that perfect union. The NAACP on the national, state, and local level has prioritized the environmental racism, and the disparity of sightings of health impaired sites in communities of color. The NAACP has mandated that we focus on equity and fairness as we look at environmental racism. The Transportation and Climate Initiative addresses these NAACP concerns, and we underscore and highlight them and call for allies and advocates to continue to pursue this cause and its implementation. I take particular note of the mayor's comments, and I associate myself with his comments in that regard. Additionally, as a local elected official whose district is comprised of a majority of persons of color of low and moderate income, my focus is laser-like on questions of social justice, inclusion, and fairness in all areas, but especially climate and transportation. Unfortunately, too often in urban areas, among people of color, although we suffer in a disproportionate way from transportation inequities and climate impacts, we don't always see this as our movement. The aftermath of COVID-19 and its continuing effects shows us the need to overcome those thoughts in communities of color. Environmental justice, environmental equity is our issue. It is our cause, not only because it is a just cause and a righteous cause, but it affects and impacts people of color and marginalized people directly and heavily. Our goal, our mission in my mind, is how to connect the experiences that urban dwellers, persons of color, the marginalized endure with efforts to overcome and ameliorate their conditions. We have learned the lessons I would submit that we are all in this together. Now, strategies must be implemented to improve the quality of life in all areas of all people. The Transportation and Climate Initiative is a historic, correct, and necessary step to a more fair, more just, and more healthy New Jersey. Let's continue to work together for its implementation in a New Jersey that we can be proud of, be proud to live in, and pass on to future generations. I would respectfully submit that this is a great step towards that, and you have in Atlantic City our commitment to support it in every way possible.
Well said, Council Member, and we're very grateful for your support. That was very powerful. I'd like to now turn it over to Commissioner Singh of Burlington County.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Balvir Singh, Commissioner from Burlington County, the northernmost county of the southern part of New Jersey. We are part of South Jersey. not Central Jersey or North Jersey. I just always like to say that. So it's my pleasure to join the EOPA today to speak about the importance of green transportation projects. From the very first day I joined the county government about 3 years ago, I have made it my mission to support clean, green policies and action that help conserve, protect our region's water, air, and natural resources. And of course, encouraging the residents all along to do the same thing. From the this year, earlier in the year, our board unanimously adopted a resolution in support of the Green Amendment in the New Jersey, so that the environmental rights are written into the New Jersey Constitution, along with the other essentials, such as the right to hold a property, speak, assemble, and worship freely. Burlington County is one of the first New Jersey counties to back that amendment. We did it because we believe protecting resources as the host for the New Jersey Pinelands, the Kirkwood Aquifer, Rancocas Creek, and the Delaware River flowing through us. It's essential that we protect our present and future. We also believe in environmental justice and support actions to hold polluters responsible for the environmental damages that they cause. And we believe the aggressive steps should be taken to help curtail these greenhouse gas emissions whenever possible. I think, as Councilman Shabazz and Mayor Bhalla said, we do need help from the federal government and state to do these things. Sometimes our localities do not have the capacity to curtail these memorandums with these industries to meet our needs, or even have the tools to do that. So having federal government and state government adopt these changes, adopt these guidelines would tremendously help our communities. No one county, town, or even a state can tackle the climate change alone, but if we all act together, we can certainly make a difference. Burlington County is helping every way we can. I'm proud of some of the steps we have taken, particularly in creation of a green pedestrian and bicycle path throughout our county. We have created close to 50 miles of regional and park trails. And next month, we're actually going to be celebrating a 5-mile section of the proposed heritage trail along the Delaware River. And work is also in progress on completing another 20 miles of pedestrian and bike trails by 2025. These projects may not be a lot of attention seeking, but they help promote healthy lifestyles. They enhance our communities. They occupy spaces where you would have cars. So instead, now we're keeping the cars off the road at least part of the time. The transportation sector, as we know, makes up 42% of the state's greenhouse gas. As a heavy agriculture county, we are continuously relying on the trucks to transport our goods to the ports. So the past decade, has seen an unprecedented rise in warehouses in Burlington County. Tens of millions of square feet of warehouses line the streets where we used to have open spaces. This has led to detrimental effects on health and lifestyle for some of our vulnerable communities, and coincidentally or not so coincidentally, it happens to be communities of color or communities of low socioeconomic status. As we know, the air pollutants can be seen but can kill. The study shows that in New Jersey, experienced almost 1,200 premature deaths in 2016 due to ozone and fine particle pollution from vehicle emissions. So there's a county that is growing in warehouses, growing with truck traffic. This is definitely concerning for me. So as we build back our communities after this pandemic, we have an opportunity to reduce our pollution, increase economic opportunity, and help drive our recovery by investing in clean and affordable and efficient transportation. I'm also happy to lend my voice to call for greater accountability for polluters and to ensure the low socioeconomic communities and minority communities that have suffered for a long time impacts of pollutants are protected from having additional industrial facilities developed near them. We all have a right to live in communities with clean water, air, and natural resources. We all have the right to live in communities that aren't rife for the pollution. So I'm excited to join EOP, Mayor Bhalla, Councilmember Shabazz, Richard Lawton from Sustainable Business Council, and many other electeds that are part of this effort, but not with us today, in support for the TCI. So thank you for having me, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate you underscoring the health issues currently associated with transportation emissions and how that is affecting communities of color in particular. We'll now turn it over to Richard Lawton of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to join this important conversation and offer kind of a business perspective that's based on the belief that economic success and the common good can and must go together. Our organization is the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council. We're a state affiliate of the American Sustainable Business Council, which is a network of companies and business organizations that represent over 250,000 companies nationwide. And these businesses cut across a wide range of sectors and size, but what they have in common is working to advance a combination of market-driven innovation and policy change aimed at creating a more vibrant, equitable, and sustainable economy within a triple bottom line framework of people, planet, and profit. Companies and investors now increasingly understand that driving this type of large-scale systemic change is contingent on transitioning to a decarbonized transportation system, especially given the growing economic and environmental risk associated with climate change. And employees are increasingly opting for careers and jobs that give them a sense of purpose. And decarbonization is a top of mind topic for a lot of these employees. When the consulting firm McKinsey & Company interviewed about 2,600 companies last year, 23% of them indicated they're already using an internal carbon charge, and another 22% plan to do so in the next 2 years. So a growing list of companies are feeling an increasing sense of urgency to create a transportation future that enables both economic growth and substantial decarbonization. So that's why more than 100 major investors, companies, and institutions with operations and employees throughout the Northeast and this region have submitted letters in support of TCI, urging state leaders to adopt a regional policy approach to cutting transportation emissions in an efficient and cost-effective way. So supporters of TCI and signers of a letter organized by series include companies like Ben & Jerry's, Biogen, Cliff Bar, DSM North America, Eileen Fisher, Novartis, Nestle, Seventh Generation, IKEA, Unilever, and many more, including Hackensack Meridian Health, which has cited how the profound connection between increased exposure to vehicle emissions and elevated mortality rates from COVID-19 highlights the need for immediate action to tackle emissions from the region's transportation system. Also, regional manufacturers like Worthen Industries understand the critical role that transportation plays in the region's economy. David Worthen, who's their CEO, has stated that by working together, the region's governors are seizing the opportunity to further tackle the challenges of climate change and transform our transportation system into a more modern, electrified, and efficient system. And Diego, as a global leader in the production of spirits and beer, Diego recognizes that a key portion of its environmental impact comes from shipping and transportation. So they seek to meet their sustainability goals by, they view electrifying the transportation sector as a crucial component. And finally, many online retailers are striving to limit the negative impact that their operations have on the environment. And Etsy is one of them. Etsy even took the bold step of becoming the first global e-commerce marketplace to offset 100% of emissions from shipping. But as their CEO, Josh Silverman, notes, climate change cannot be solved by any one person, company, or government body, which is why Etsy views collaborative solutions like TCI as a critical step in driving meaningful reductions in carbon emissions in the long term. So these companies know that business as usual is not only unsustainable, it's also increasingly risky and costly. Large institutional investors like BlackRock know it, more and more citizens and consumers know it, and companies know it. But private investment alone is not nearly enough to drive the type of large-scale change that's required. As a McKinsey and Company study points out, for many industries, the upfront costs of this transition will be large, long before any benefits can be reaped. Structuring investment decisions, operations extensions, and technology or business model transitions in a way that preserves options for later green pathways to develop is critical and can help preserve financial value. So smart, forward-thinking policy initiatives like TCI that internalize carbon costs, realign incentives, and raise the necessary public investment are really critical. TCI is projected to increase regional GDP by $5.59 billion while creating up to 25,000 jobs. Clean air, cleaner, walkable, bikeable towns, especially in overburdened communities. It's all good for our health, for our local businesses, and for our economy overall. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, Richard. Really appreciate you being here with us today. We're now going to open it up for the Q&A section of our discussion. I see we've already got questions coming into the Q&A function. Please feel free to use that or the chat on the side as well. Our first question, I'll just open this up to the group in general. Why is the 50% mandate in the TCI Memorandum of Understanding to use 50% of those funds for environmental justice communities so important compared to some of the other legislation working their way through at the federal level, for instance? And Mayor Bhalla, would you like to take that first?
Yeah, I would just say that that's a really substantial benchmark. When you look at the commitments the federal legislators are seeking with respect to, for example, the Gateway Tunnel, a 50% commitment is something that really puts skin in the game. And if we can match that when we talk about climate integrity and climate change, that's something to aspire to, and really, in my mind, raises the bar both at the local level and the federal level.
Chris?
Yeah, please, Commissioner.
So I agree. I think we have to, because anytime we are doing overhaul in a policy or regulations, I've seen that happen in the state, in our state, when we did the whole marijuana overhaul. We look at where has the negative impacts of the prior regulation been. So in that case, we knew that all the marijuana policing had led to the hurt in the communities of color, in the low socioeconomic communities. And I know at that time legislators were very keen on making sure that when they write the legislation that they put in that there's investment made to make up for that, for those communities. I think it's the same approach here. We have to look at it, as I was mentioning in my remarks. In my county, we saw tens of millions of square feet of warehouses coming up within the past decade, taking streets upon streets. But when you look at it demographically on the map, it's not always your communities that are affluent. It's usually the communities that are already struggling with the housing market, and the localities are looking for a quick injection in the cash and a pile of monies. So they invite these warehouses, but on the long run, you see all the impact from the air pollutants that is coming to those communities. So it's just important that when we do have policies that go into place that are going to generate any revenues, that we dedicate those dollars to help those communities.
Hey, Chris, I can add something just
Absolutely.
quickly. Yeah, climate change has been called the largest market failure in history. And that's because it doesn't include the cost of carbon. At a local level, what that means is that those communities that have the least economic power often have the least political power. So as a result, in terms of economic activity, they don't really share proportionately in the economic benefits of that activity, yet they disproportionately share or are burdened with the negative externalities in the form of pollution and other risks and costs from the economic activity. So the importance of making sure that we invest at least 50% of the proceeds into those communities is just a way to kind of correct that, but not just correct a past injustice, but also invest in ways that can help these communities thrive in a more sustainable 21st century economy, participate in it as well. So just like to add that.
Chris, if I may very quickly, I think that it's also a good public policy, not gesture, it's a good public policy practice to apply the benefits of a initiative to where the most damage has been done. And I think clearly that is in communities of color and people who are underserved and people who are marginalized politically. So I think that 50% only makes good public policy sense, as well as the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And Councilmember Shabazz, it looks like we have some other questions directed for you. Specifically, as a leader in the Black community, what do you feel some of the best investments for the TCI would be for people of color in Atlantic City?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that there are many areas investment. As the mayor mentioned and the commissioner mentioned, transportation is something that people of color and people of lower income are forced to really take public transportation. I think we need almost a crash effort to increase public transportation in an environmentally sensitive way. That would have a direct, immediate impact on the lives of people who we now call frontline heroes, but people who don't have the ability to work from home, Chris, and don't have the ability to do some of the things that some of us take for granted. I think that would be an immediate impact, a heavier investment in parks. In fact, we just did in our council yesterday, a special meeting, a grant that we are seeking from the DEP to expand a park in my district and other districts. In urban areas, unfortunately, they are overburdened with things that are negative, and they have under resources and things that are positive that would increase their quality of life. So investments in parks, investments in bicycle paths. We just did some bicycle paths in our city. We need more of that. Investments in electric bikes, investment in alternative transportation modes. They are practical, they are doable, and in a city you could see a real change if we can get resources in that. So I would suggest all of those things in Atlantic City and more as we look. We just stood up an environmental commission in Atlantic City a couple months ago, and they're going to be looking at the best practices for Atlantic City, not only for Atlantic City, as the mayor said, for the state, for the country. This is not just a South Jersey or New Jersey problem. This is a national, worldwide problem, and we all have to pitch in. But that's what I would suggest for Atlantic City.
Thank you, Councilmember. We've got some other questions here, specifically on some of the details regarding TCI. Specifically, how does it differ from a tax on corporations? Richard, do you want to take that one first, or is there someone else that wants to jump in?
I can start it off just with a quick response. And, one thing I'll say too is, tax is often used as something from people who would like to keep things the same, kind of stay on a business as usual course. They like to call things a tax when it's not. That's a misrepresentation of what this is. This is an attempt to basically internalize costs that have been externalized to the environment and to society. It's very different. It's very different than a tax. And so this is an attempt, because if you don't have, if prices of all energy sources don't have all the cost internalized, it really creates a distorted price mechanism in the marketplace. So this is an attempt to make sure that carbon-based fuels, the price of them at least reflects as much of the cost as possible. That actually makes it a much more efficient market when customers and businesses are looking at fuel options. So it may be kind of a subtle difference, but there's a very clear distinction between a fee and a tax. So I'll pass the baton to who else would like to build on that or add to that.
Thank you. Mayor Bhalla, anything to add, or shall I move on?
You can move on, other than, this is really, I see it as an investment, which, whenever you, spend resources, you want to do so wisely and make sure you get some sort of return on that investment. And if the return is greater quality, addressing systemic racism through a cleaner environment, I think I don't call it that a tax. I call that a course correction through real dollar as an investment to address some of these issues of systemic racism that, as they relate to practices that are directly related to the environment and climate integrity.
Excellent. I know Councilman Shabazz has talked about some of the specific projects that Atlantic City can benefit from. Are there other projects in your jurisdictions that need transportation funding, that are infrastructure that is lacking at the moment, where you see that need for continual funding that the TCI could provide? Commissioner Singh, I know that you had spoken previously about the Centerton Road and its need to be repaired or expanded.
Yeah, so we have a bridge that we took off service a few years ago. 14,000 cars travel on it, second most busiest local bridge we had in our county. But because of the the expense that comes in with the replacement of it, it's over 100 years old bridge. We took it off because of the structurally it was just not safe anymore. But we don't have the funds to replace it, right? And so the issue is a little bit more complicated because that's the bridge that connects the largest community in our county that is majority minority in Willingboro, and it connects to the next community, Mount Laurel, which is a heavily your white majority town, and also the second largest populated town in the county. So residents feel that that bridge serves more than just a vehicular traffic. It was a connection of their community to be able to access the county college, which has moved the primary campus right across the bridge on the other side of the town. All the medical services are right off it, the grocery shopping, everything is off of it. And now the only way for them to kind of get there is either they take a long route around the town going through other towns, or get on the 295 State Road, which shouldn't really be a regular thing to do if you're just trying to go to a doctor's appointment and so on. That's a bridge that if we were to get a funding, I would heavily advocate for. It is, it cuts down the commute time, so definitely helps with the pollution that the cars would be on the road for. Definitely connects the communities, and having infrastructure, I think we have seen over time in different places too. Infrastructure is an economic investment in the community. So when you build infrastructure in certain communities, you are putting a value into those communities. You are saying this community is important enough for me to connect roads and bridges to it. So I think that the issue goes a little bit deeper than just having the cars travel. We want to make sure that community has a future, and part of that would be having a connected bridge to go across there's a Centerton Road bridge. I was just thinking earlier on seeing these emissions fees as tax or not seeing it. I know earlier, a few years ago, we were given a proposal having a stormwater utility. Could it be seen as more of a utility, rather utility management than as we do with stormwater or other things than as a tax, which I don't see that. This is more of something that is bound to happen. So it's more for regulating it and hopefully there are I think as the policy grows, hopefully we're able to target those dollars back into those communities.
I think a very important part, if I can real quick, I think Richard hit upon it, the way that we frame this question going forward. People in America are tax averse, especially in New Jersey. So when you talk about a new tax, people automatically are against it. When you say it's an investment and then explain how it is an investment, I think that puts a different face on it. And I think that can be more acceptable politically and culturally. People understand investments and they understand the importance of investments. So I think the language is very important. And I think Richard hit upon it. It's not a tax, it's an investment in a higher quality of living for everyone. And when you invest in underserved communities, when you invest in communities of color, even though the investment might be going directly there, it impacts people going out. And I think that's how I would suggest that we frame it.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Mayor Bhalla, we have a question for you here. You touched upon the health impacts of environmental justice. What are the health impacts from transportation in Hoboken that you see, and how will fully funded TCI support clean transportation and infrastructure for your community?
Yeah, the health impacts are hard to necessarily quantify. Recently, with respect to the pandemic, we were laser focused on making sure that the communities that did not have access to the resources that were required, whether it's testing at the inception, food insecurity, and eventually vaccinations, that we went literally door to door in our underserved communities to make sure that people had equal access to those services. In respect to transportation, and as it relates to health, underserved communities in Hoboken, minority communities in Hoboken, don't have the same micro-mobility options necessarily. That's why when we partnered with City Bike for shared services with Jersey City, we made sure that any resident in public housing was offered discounted prices to make sure that this is an affordable micro-mobility, clean, safe transportation option available to minority communities. And also in doing so, we're seeking to reduce the health impact of carbon emissions in those communities as well.
Excellent, thank you. I see that we're beginning to edge towards the end of our time together. So there's a few questions I will try and combine into one here. Folks have had some similar thoughts. Given the commitment New Jersey has to being a climate leader and to environmental justice, Governor Murphy has still not signed the TCI Memorandum of Understanding. So what would be your message to the governor as he continues to weigh this decision to encourage him to move forward with this policy? And I'll open that up to any of the panelists.
I'll just start and say that my message would be to, and I'm sure this is already being done, but to consider the connection between all of these policy issues that the governor has been upfront on, has been very proactive on, whether it's social and racial justice, whether it's the environment and climate change. The governor's been on the forefront of these issues, but they're all very interconnected, as I hope this discussion has shown. Literally the future of this state, and as the councilman said, the planet depends on proactive leadership. And I think, association with the TCI would be a furtherance of pre-existing affirmative commitments from the governor's office to these issues, where he's frankly been, a national leader on in many respects. So that would be, my thoughts in terms of incentivizing, further action and collaboration with TCI from the governor's office.
Thank you. Councilmember Shabazz.
Okay. I would say I agree with the Mayor 200%, but I would also maybe just add on to that TCI memorandum is a continuation of his policy and his legacy. I think when we look at the history of the Murphy administration, it will have to be one of the most diverse cabinets ever put into place. One that has, as the mayor has indicated, the initiatives that he's put into place with regard to justice and equity. So the TCI, in my mind, is just a continuation of what he's already done. And I think that we need to say very clearly that there has been a lot done, that Governor Murphy has been a leader and an advocate. And in my mind, I would just suggest to him respectfully that this TCI is a continuation, a logical continuation and a logical extension of what he's already done.
I would agree with that completely. I think, this is TCI is completely aligned with and could help actualize the roadmap that's been laid out in the Energy Master Plan. So this could be a key part of making that a reality. It's also a natural extension of what's been started specifically with the electric vehicle law that was passed into law last year. So I agree completely. I think TCI is a way of making much more concrete these larger plans and really getting us closer to our goals in a way that's not just New Jersey, but recognizes that we're interrelated. We're connected to other parts of the region, and New Jersey is perfectly situated, being the most densely populated state between two major metro areas, New York City and Philadelphia. We're perfectly situated. This is kind of a natural fit for New Jersey.
Just to echo the comments, I'm a big fan of this governor, Governor Murphy. And as everybody said, this is exactly the type of work he does. From time and time again, he has shown his commitment to advance environment causes, justice along racial lines. In any facet of politics or life, I think we can see, this governor is always happens to be on the right side, moving things forward. So I would, expect him to, have a full consideration and endorse and support the program. So I would be surprised or why he wouldn't. This is his agenda. It's been his agenda since the beginning, as he has promised that this is the direction he wants to lead the state to.
And just quickly add that, his goal, which we clearly support, is to create a stronger, fairer economy for New Jersey. TCI helps move that from being a slogan, which I know is much more than that, to really more of a reality, especially with the investment of the funds raised into the environmental justice communities, and also the economic benefits that will come from creating a decarbonized transportation system. So.
Thank you all, and thank you again to all of our panelists, all of our guests for being here. Are there any final remarks from our panel? I don't want to deprive anyone of the opportunity.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. This is an important, critical issue. And I just wanted to join Commissioner Singh. I'm a fan of Governor Murphy too. He's a strong supporter of us in Atlantic City. We work with him. In fact, he was just here recently talking about public safety issues. And again, I think that this conversation is important today. And I hope that as we move closer to our goal, that we'll continue working cooperatively.
I would just very briefly echo those comments from the councilman, and say that I'd like to thank the TCI for pushing the ball forward. I think this was a robust discussion. I've learned a lot, within the course of the hour, and I think further continued advocacy, collaboration, and conversations like this are critical to our future and to getting to a better place on these environmental justice matters.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much again. Thank you to our
Thank you.
Everybody be safe.
Thank you. Thank you.